easily, for me, probably the best look on AI. We've had blockbuster kind of sci-fi films that we've all seen before, but this one, it really showcases the horror of everything, and I think that's what makes it so impressive.
Even more relevant than ever before, also coming off of the writer's strike and the actor's strike.
This is the perfect blend, I think, of his visuals and his screenplay coming together.
I feel like he doesn't have that same passion with the later films that he brought to Ex Machina.
Definitely his best film, I think.
Shame to see where he's ended up now, honestly.
Far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
One of the worst performances of my career, and they never doubted it for a second.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
Son of a bitch. He stole my life.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast. Today we have a very big episode for you. We'll be covering Alex Garland's Ex Machina. Alex Garland is a very in-the-news filmmaker right now with his new Civil War, which has been met with very divisive reactions. But going back to his directorial debut, Ex Machina, he's always been someone who wanted to comment on, very big things going on in the world. And with this one, he does, I think we could all agree, probably his best film, with one of the most impressive directorial debuts, not just of recent years, but of all time, with so many thought-provoking ideas, not even just for people who like to really dive into film analysis, but even from, just general casual film watchers. I think it still is very thought-provoking for most people. And yeah, it's just such a great idea movie about, AI and, the way it can be used for manipulation and deception. And I think also just rewatching this with its IMAX re-release recently is so relevant. It's more relevant, I think, today than ever before, but especially with the recent release of some AI-generated short films, which have made some headlines recently. So I think the timing around that really makes this film even more relevant than ever before. Also coming off of the writer's strike and the actor's strike over the last year, where AI has been a big controversy throughout not just the film industry, but the entire world as a whole. And this film really asks a lot of questions about where it could go and, the potential dark sides of it. This is a film that on a first watch, I found the ideas interesting, and, it was a solid film. Like, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something I really was dying to rewatch or left a huge impact on me, even though I thought there were some very good things about it. But once I got to see this in the IMAX theater on that re-release, I just got a whole new appreciation for this film, and just enjoyed it so much more on a rewatch with the captivating sound and music of the theater, which I think I kind of lost in my first watching it at home. But yeah, we have so many things to talk about this film. It's a film that leaves you with a lot to think about. So let's get right into it. Oscar, what are your thoughts on Ex Machina, Garland's directorial debut?
Yeah, so I'm right along there with you. This is definitely his best for me, although I think Annihilation is just underneath. But he's an interesting filmmaker. I know he's had a lot of experience. He's a major writer, obviously renowned from 28 Days Later, Sunshine, Dread. He's worked with Danny Boyle quite a lot. So this is an interesting task, and we've seen a lot of AI films before, but this is quite easily, for me, probably the best look on AI like we've had, because you get kind of those really kind of blockbuster kind of sci-fi films about AI that we've all seen before, but this one just it's different. It really showcases the horror of everything, and I think that's what makes it so impressive. There are generally some moments in this that do kind of give off typical horror tropes, and rewatching it today, I absolutely saw that, and it really holds up for me well. And also, like you said, it's obviously so relevant now with the strikes going on and the AI threatening a lot of things. Obviously, we've seen it recently with Late Night with the Devil. It's only tiny things, but those tiny things just end up causing massive butterfly effects that I can easily see happening. And yeah, I get a lot of kind of joy from watching this film, because I think it's so well done, and it's just so impressive. And yeah, it's still his best. And it's unfortunate to see how far he's fallen, honestly. Really
yeah, we will not be talking about Civil War.
Yeah, I really do love this film. It's definitely one of my I definitely call it one of my favorites. But yeah, Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I'm with you too as well. This is definitely like, at least from the stuff he's directed, this is my favorite. I'm a big fan of, especially his early stuff that he wrote in the horror genre and the science fiction in the early 2000s. I think those stuff are some of the best of those decades, like 20 Days Later, or 28 Days Later, and Sunshine are amazing. So kind of going straight into sci-fi for his first film was kind of expected, or what you'd expect from him. It kind of worked perfectly. And I think this really was like one of the standout sci-fis from last decade. It's it's one of the early hits from A24, and I think it goes to show how kind of universal kind of the themes and stuff that are kind of brought up in this, because it kind of relates to everybody. Everybody worries about what AI or is going to happen in the future and what's going to happen with sentient beings, like in this movie. So it's something that kind of appeals to everybody, I think, and this is why it's definitely probably his most popular film. It's one of A24's most popular films, still almost a decade later. So I think it's a really successful debut from him. Of course, he's kind of strayed away from sci-fi and stuff a bit more recently. Delved into horror, and then Civil War. Not the biggest fan of, just from what came out. But yeah, I really like his early work, and especially his early directorial work. But yeah, he's really interesting. It's kind of a shame that he's retiring now. Kind of lost the interest in being the director.
Pretty sure he's still directing one more film.
Is it?
Yeah, there's cast in. It's called Warfare. Charles Melton's in the cast, and there's quite a few other names in it. I'm pretty sure he's directing one more film, and then he's calling it a day on directing anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah,
was that Warfare?
Unless that's just not happening now, but there has been like said that he's doing that.
Yeah, well, he's writing 28 years later, so it's good. I'm glad he's gone back to the horror genre, at least for writing. So yeah, I'm still excited to see what he does outside of his directing stuff.
Yeah, I think kind of getting more into the film, I think the most interesting thing to talk about, of course, is the AI in the film, and just kind of the ideas of where it could go. And I think it touches on AI in so many different ways, and just how many different ways it can be used. Of course, we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff right away. So if you haven't seen the film, we highly recommend, add this to your watch later. Check out Alex Garland's first film, and then, come back to the video later, because we're going to spoil a lot of things. But, right away from the very start of the film, we have the opening where it's pretty much all score, no real world sounds. And then that becomes the first real sound we hear is that ultra loud helicopter, which, even though it's not AI, it's still a machine. And a lot of this is about, and it's just surrounded by nature. And Garland, I think, one big consistency, and I've seen 3 of his films. I haven't seen Annihilation, but of the 3 I've seen, he definitely is very interested in nature and likes to show you nature on screen. And we just have the helicopter surrounded by the green nature. And as soon as Caleb, our protagonist, enters Oscar Isaac's compound, I guess you could call it, he's just interacting with AI machines. They might not be as sophisticated or intelligent as Ava's character, the AI who will follow throughout the film, but he's just interacting with machines right away, and just is kind of setting the tone for and making us realize how much of our lives are spent interacting with machines in different ways, just right from the very start. And yeah, I think a lot of the major questions it asks are things like, AI's desire to survive, and, how AI can manipulate us, how AI can deceive us. And, of course, the never ending question of AI is, what it means to be real, what it means to be human. And, throughout these meetings with Ava, which of course are the most interesting scenes of the film, we really, each one of these sessions, I feel like it asks a different question about AI versus being human. And I feel like every single one of them, we really just see Ava's superiority over Caleb, the human character, in intelligence. Not only that, but just emotional understanding and things like the way she can read all of his micro expressions. And he can't read her micro expressions. I feel like human beings can get a read on people and how they're feeling based on certain body language and things like that. But this is a whole nother animal of reading every little detail on his face to be able to essentially like read his mind. And so even the things that we consider like the most human things, like emotional intelligence, we just see the AI have such a far superior knowledge of, which just shows that he's totally met his match here. And Caleb is interesting because he's a smart character. Clearly, like he's a coder for a tech company. Like clearly, he's a smart guy, but he's just totally like in over his head here with Oscar Isaac and Ava, one man, one machine, and both the ability of both man and machine's ability to manipulate human beings, and just the battle of manipulation between the two of them, and how he's just caught in the middle really asks us a lot of very interesting questions about both AI and what it means to be human.
Yeah, like I mentioned in kind of my intro, I think this is the most impressive kind of commentary on it that we've seen in a film. And I think that really just comes down to the fact that he really grounds it down to his roots. We see all these AI sci-fi films that are just massively kind of in the future and have got all these ideas that are totally beyond our kind of comprehension and be able to get to that point yet. And Garland just kind of dumbs it down to, we got this from using all the cell phones and cameras in the world, something that actually does happen now, and really makes us feel like it's something that actually could happen rather than something that just isn't achievable yet. Even though this isn't achievable yet, it feels like it's something that is, because he is being used by something that's happening right now. And I think that just what makes it so scary is that this kind of reality is slowly becoming ever more present. And with that, the idea of the Turing test that he uses in this film, obviously kind of a famous kind of AI computer test to test whether or not someone is human or AI, I think is really interesting, because he brings it up in the beginning and then he kind of instantly dismisses it because they kind of see it as it's not actually a Turing test, because Caleb can see Ava, and the way it's usually done is you have like the lead of the test, in which this case is Caleb, and then and then you have a human as well, and an AI or a computer, and they're both hidden. And he has to tell which one is human and which one is AI. But in this, they explain it differently. But I think that the whole point of this film is it's kind of almost one big Turing test, because if you think about it, there's three people in the house. There's the leader of the test, which is Caleb, the human, which is Nathan, and then the AI, which is Ava. And I think kind of further down the line, we see kind of these Blade Runner-esque bits of commentary on people questioning whether they're AI or not, whether they're AI or robots. And I think that's really, really clever, honestly. I think that's what I picked up most on rewatches, the similarities in kind of message that Blade Runner is trying to convey. I think it's such a brilliant way to ground AI down to kind of reality and present.
Really good comparison, because it's kind of like, it's not necessarily thrown in your face like the stuff, but you can go down in like such a rabbit hole of like AI and just keep going further and deeper, and that's what makes this screenplay kind of, you can just go down like a rabbit hole of like AI, just like Blade Runner, although it's not necessarily like thrown right in your face, but you can just go very deep into that topic. And I think that, like you said, like this is a really kind of simple down sci-fi. It's nothing really grand. It's on a 15 million budget, so they're just in like one house most of the time, and that's what makes it work so well, because it is really just down to the basics. And that Turing test really does center around the whole film, like you said, but it really works so well with all the characters around the film as well, because it's not really like a proper test, because as we know, like Oscar Isaac's character messing with the results kind of throughout the whole film. Like the whole thing is set up to almost trick Donald Gleason's character. The whole, like, because the AI is all set up just to basically appeal to him. He's like stolen all his he's stolen his face movements, because we see at the start it's kind of scanning his face, and it kind of knows like all his interests and what he likes and like a woman. So it's kind of built towards just kind of appealing to him. So it's not kind of the best scenario for the test if he was actually doing it. So yeah, the whole like idea of just like, is Oscar Isaac, like what's he doing, what's he's messing about with, like what's his plan with the AI. I think that's really what's interesting in this film. and it allows you to like rewatch it so many times. You can see the different sides of the character. You can watch it from the AI side, or you can watch it from Donald Gleason's character's perspective, or Oscar Isaac's, and it does give it a lot of rewatchability. So I think that's really why the screenplay is so great in Alex Garland's filmography.
Totally agree with about the screenplay. I think it's the biggest strength of this film might be the screenplay and just the ideas here. You know, I'm someone who's not normally the biggest fan of dialogue, and this is a film where the dialogue is just so captivating and interesting. And, you know, not to talk about his other projects, but like it kind of is an example of, you know, kind of how far some of his scripts have fallen, where I think it's a weakness of some of his later films, the dialogue, where this film, I think the dialogue is just so captivating and interesting. The way they're not necessarily speaking like normal human beings. Like it's not normal everyday conversation. Like they're having real kind of thought-provoking conversations about big world ideas. And I just think it's really always very interesting things that they're talking about. And it makes the dialogue interesting to listen to, which I don't feel from honestly most films that I watch. But yeah, I think Oscar Isaac is definitely one of the most interesting characters. You know, he's of course like a huge, insanely high IQ tech genius, but he also kind of breaks a lot of the norms of what we think of with a tech genius. Like we first meet him, he's like sweaty and boxing and like working out, super casual. Like he's drunk and flawed character for a super genius. We also know that he lives in like this isolated compound from reality, where he really only interacts with machines. Like, I mean, Caleb's not there. Like, he's not interacting with any other humans. He's only interacting with the machines that he creates. So I think his view on humanity and sort of like this God complex he has is really warps his perception of, like I said, it's that question of what's real, what separates human beings from AI. And I think for him, there's very little, that line is very thin, because he is pretty much designing AI to be as human-like as possible. And in some ways, you know, more intelligent than human beings. And he really has next to no human being interactions. The women that he's, you know, sleeping with are machines. He doesn't have any, like, there's just no human connection in his life. It all comes from artificial machines. And in addition to just the machines of his house, like the security system and all the kind of different tech gadgets, I guess you could say, that he has. So I think he is an ultra interesting character. And like I said, Ava, of course, manipulates Caleb very much in this film. But the reason why Caleb eventually is able to be manipulated by Ava, and why we as the audience start to some of us start to side with Ava a little more, is because of how little we trust Oscar Isaac's character, and how much it becomes clear that he's manipulating him, which is how, you know, Caleb falls for the trap of Ava, only because of how manipulative Oscar Isaac's character is. And in the beginning, you know, he says, like, you know, you've been chosen because you're so intelligent and you're like one of our best coders, whatever, and that's why you've been chosen for this. But every time Caleb has any type of input, Oscar Isaac really just disregards it and keeps like conditioning him to think and respond on emotional instinct rather than actually asking questions and thinking about things. Every time Caleb seems to ask any form of question, Oscar Isaac kind of tells him, you know, just, you know, rely on like your emotions and your instincts, because he wants him to, you know, throughout human history, sex has always been like the master manipulator of humanity, and men especially. And he really is exploiting that here to test the AI's ability to manipulate humans. And he wants Caleb to really rely on those instincts so that he can be manipulated by the AI, because Oscar Isaac wants, you know, to prove that the AI has a certain superiority over humans and kind of make him almost like a godlike figure with the AI. He also plays dumb a lot, Oscar Isaac. Like, he acts like he understands much less than he does. Who knows if he actually is even as much of an alcoholic as he pretends to be, or if that's just a front to kind of lower Caleb's guard. But I think he's a super interesting character with his kind of manipulation tactics. And, you know, it's a brilliant performance from Oscar Isaac. Like, his vocal work in this is really exceptional. And just he really is a more interesting, you know, we think of people like Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk, like these kind of other, I don't know what the word is, but they behave very differently than most human beings. And Oscar Isaac's kind of like that, but at the same time, he feels more like a grounded, real human being for this kind of, super tech genius character. So I just think he's one of the most interesting characters, and a brilliant performance from Oscar Isaac.
I just noticed something. I don't know if this is mentioned in the film, and this would be a weird comparison if it is, but Nathan's surname in the film is Bateman. And I think that's kind of what obviously everyone will recognize that as Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, which I think is maybe just me connecting weird dots, but both of them kind of play similar characters in their kind of manipulation of kind of women sexually. And obviously this is further progressed because it's AI, and maybe that's just me connecting too many dots, but I think it's a really interesting choice of surname to have those kind of two characters. But aside from that, I think this film surprisingly has some kind of...
Sorry to cut you off, Oscar, real quick, just because we're on the topic. I actually took note of this myself, that his first name is Nathan, and something about that, like Garland's fascination with nature, and the way Nathan kind of is similar to nature. Maybe that's just a total coincidence, but I think the way Nathan is as a similar name to nature, I at least think is intentional in some way. But that's just a note, just because we're on the topic I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing, and I think it's funny that you haven't seen Annihilation, because that's definitely the film where he uses nature most. So definitely a kind of an interesting comparison. But yeah, I think this film has some really surprising kind of bits of commentary, like you were saying, on kind of sexuality and things like that, because there's kind of conversations in this about kind of AI and this gray area and them not necessarily needing a sexuality. And it's something that I necessarily didn't pick up on kind of first watches. And I think it's a really interesting thing that he touches on just more than kind of this blurring the lines between AI and human even more.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac for me is like, he is the real standout for this film. I think just kind of the uncertainty that you have about his like motives, his opinion on like sentient AI, like you're saying, is pretty clear eventually. He's not, although it's kind of the only interaction, like you said, he kind of doesn't look at them as like beings. I think he's pretty brutal with them, and he's kind of quite easily just replace them. He doesn't look at them as actual things, although he's obviously trying to go for that end game of actually being like almost human. He'll just kind of scrap them and start all over if they're not perfect. Yeah, he's amazing in this film for me. I think his presence, like, it's really dominating in the scenes. He's a pretty volatile character because you never really know what version of him you're gonna get. Like you said, you never know if he's real. Like you said, you don't know if he actually is an alcoholic or if that's all just for show. And it's kind of the case for everything really in this film. When you rewatch it, you notice like the small things that he could be lying or it could be the truth. You never really know, even after several rewatches. And that's kind of puts you in the place of Donald Gleason's character, because he himself is just kind of questioning everything going on in this house and what is actually happening. What's the motive for him coming to this experiment. And yeah, it just, his appearance and everything, his shaved head. I know he modeled his beard after Stanley Kubrick for some reason. And
that's quite funny.
His shaved head and like lifestyle, it instantly gives you this like impression he's like this really organized and efficient like billionaire that you've like come to know at the start, but you find that he's really kind of lost the plot. At least you could look at it from that angle. You never really know if he has really like become a psychopath. I'm sure that side probably is true, because there's no way he's just stayed in that house all by himself with just AI and not kind of lost the plot a bit. So yeah, he's a really interesting character. Donald Gleason as well. He's not like the most interesting character, I'd say, but I really just like him in anything that he does. Although his American accent is pretty dodgy. In this movie, I thought that kept distracting me because he's got such a like distinct like English accent, so I could really just tell he's putting it on. But yeah, I really like the performances in this movie.
Yeah, kind of pivoting a bit from some of the performances, all of which are great. And of course, this being a low budget first directorial debut, he definitely limits the cast and kind of makes it like not totally a chamber piece, because there's a lot of different rooms and environments within the film that we see. But I think that we really put a lot of the production focus in terms of the budget seems to have gone to, of course, the visual effects, but also just the set design. I think the production design was a big part of it. And it has like this ultra, like a lot of straight lines and this ultra modern kind of duller colors, even though we see, colors with the vibrant greens of nature and the really strong red lights whenever the power goes out. The general just look and design of the production design without the lights is very kind of dull colors, a lot of browns and grays, kind of like we see in like this very kind of repressed of a color and heightened emotion, repressed creativity kind of to the design of a lot of modern architecture and design, I think. And we really see that fully embraced here. Of course, it looks like nice and expensive in terms of like clean, all that stuff. But I think it looks very kind of repressed creatively. But I think the biggest element of the production design is the use of glass. And there's so many reflections in this film. And I'd be lying if I said I totally understand what they are. I think it's definitely like asking questions about like the different sides to humans and machines and kind of the spiritual element maybe. But I think the biggest thing about the glass is that it feels like there's no separation when there is. And there is a difference between man and machine, but the glass is like you can almost see through it, and it feels like there's no separation and difference even when there is. And I think it's kind of like how you can't tell the difference always between man and machine. And this is just my interpretation. I'm sure there's a bunch of people having a zillion other interpretations of this. This is just the way like I kind of read the film, is just the way glass feels like there's no separation when there is, when clearly the film's asking a lot about what is the separation, but you can't always see it. And that's really the way it kind of spoke to me, at least. But he uses so many reflection shots in this film. There are a ton of reflections and a ton of just a lot of straight lines. Like it's the production design is very crisp, straight lines. And his use of color is definitely worth talking about. Like I said, the production design itself is repressed in color, but we have these really vibrant greens of nature. And then in total contrast of green, the color on the complete other end of the spectrum is the red, which would really represents a lot to do with the machines and those moments where Ava, the machine, is manipulating Caleb, the human. And, when the machines, the power like goes out, everything that's really machine heavy is they use really vibrant reds to contrast the really vibrant greens. And I think the balance between those two colors is just a brilliant storytelling element from Garland. And I think, his direction here is just ultra calculated as a storyteller. It's not necessarily, I've never seen Alex Garland as really an expressionist filmmaker, like someone like a Fellini or a Carwai necessarily. But I think he's just such a good visual storyteller. And I think that his attention to detail and things like that is something that he does here that I wish I had seen more of in some of his later stuff. But I think, he does a really impressive job of using things like color and production design to really tell his story visually here. And so much extended sequences of like pure cinema of just no words and just purely visuals and using kind of music and sound to accompany those visuals. He does so much of that here that I think is really effective.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on kind of the lights. I want to touch on that a bit more. Because I think it's really something, especially kind of the red lighting. Obviously, we see in the power cuts, and obviously with AI, they don't bleed, and that's what one of the most commonly associated things is red with is blood. And kind of I see kind of the red lighting as the moments where we see Ava almost kind of bleed out because she changes her consciousness and everything kind of starts pouring out, and you get those kind of snippets of what's actually going on. And I really, really like that. And then we see it again with the dance sequence, which is one of the sequences where we actually see the red lighting, but I don't think there's a power cut in that scene. And then we kind of, and then I don't know her name, but the other AI that we don't know at the start is AI that Nathan kind of has with him all the time, kind of starts dancing and changes in that scene than what we've seen her before. Obviously, she's quite a repressed character, didn't really do much. Kind of all of them are kind of his kind of slaves almost. And then in that dance scene, we just see her change and she starts dancing. And then similarly, we kind of have that blue light coming across the back of that shot as well, in which I think the contrast between the blue and red is quite interesting, because we see kind of there's bits of blue kind of inside. We see kind of inside Ava's kind of torso area, and then obviously his company's name Blue Book as well. And then we see it around some of the light panels as well, the key areas. And I think that's one of the dance scenes is one of the only scenes where we see those two colors kind of mixed together in one shot. And touching on what you said about glass as well, I think that's really interesting, because we see in a lot of the sessions as the film is split up into, a lot of the shot, nearly all the shots of Ava has a reflection of herself in it. And quite a lot of the shots in those sequences, we don't see Caleb and Ava in the same shot together. They're nearly always separate, but there are a couple kind of there are a couple bits where they are in the same shot together, and then the very last shot of the film. I just wanted to touch on this ending briefly. The very last shot of the film is through glass with reflections of humans around her, which I think is a perfect shot to end on. The fact that you've kind of built on this idea of glass and reflections, and that's the shot you end on, I think is very, very clever, honestly. And then there's also the bit in the house where there's this tree inside, and it's got 3 concrete walls and 1 glass panel between it as well, which we see Ava standing in front of sometimes, which I think is quite clever as well. Obviously this her only kind of her closest way of nature and life, I guess, to her when she's inside. But yeah, I think, like you said, this is such an impressive kind of thing of visual storytelling, and I wish he showcased that more in his later films, honestly. But yeah, he kind of really peaked with this film and his direction.
Yeah, he really did. Although I really like how Men looks. Although I know the kind of lack of the screenplay side of that. I think that was kind of where he peaked visually, at least in my opinion. I know I seen recently that he doesn't think, or he just thinks that cinematography should be used to kind of enhance the performance and focus on the characters, which is kind of obvious in Civil War. He doesn't really put a whole lot of attention into backgrounds and the kind of things around the characters, which I don't really like personally. But in these early ones, it's much better, I think. Like the glass you were saying, I always looked at that. It kind of tries to hide the fact that Ava's in a prison. Like, this is a prison to her, and that is kind of just what the whole film is about. Her trying to get out of this kind of situation where she kind of resents Oscar Isaac's character. That we slowly find out about that as the film progresses. And the colors that appear, they really stand out because the whole production design is really sterile. It's really futuristic. I love the kind of contrast between the building and the nature around it, like Alex was saying. I really love that aspect, and it always makes this kind of film stand out in the kind of genre. And when it does have colors, those stand out even more. I know you were saying the red, blues, and the greens is kind of the RGB of electronics and computers that make up images. I think that's a really cool detail of the only colors that you showed. And this film is full of details that you can miss after several watches. Just everything in the production design has got lots of meanings behind it, and references to other stuff about AI. So yeah, it's just this is the perfect blend, I think, of his visuals and his screenplay coming together. Because I think his films after that either lacked visuals or really lacked in the screenplay department. So yeah, this is definitely his best film, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to talk about, in my opinion, by far the most interesting character, which is Ava, who is the AI, and of course, just by default, is of course going to be the character we have the most curiosity and interest about, because she's not a real person, and we question how many similarities we have to her, what the differences are, and a character who from the very first time, even before we see her, we just have so much curiosity about. And Garland in the script lets us know before we ever meet this character that she's AI. He doesn't do the thing of kind of mislead us and then of the twist of that it's AI at some point to see if we fall for it, because he's trusting that we will eventually kind of fall for Ava throughout the film, even though that we know, because of course we're kind of going through the story in Caleb's shoes, and as he knows right from the start. And I think, like I said, every test is really kind of just proving her intellectual superiority over him. And like we start learning things like she has memory, she understands social dynamics, she can read micro expressions, she understands things like social awkwardness, which you would never think like a machine, because you think of machine, you think of the main thing is human beings can feel and understand emotion. But if she can understand emotion actually more than, even if she doesn't feel it herself, she can understand emotion and manipulate it. And if she can understand human emotion better than a human can, like that's some scary shit. And yeah, then it gets to the point like she starts asking him questions, and the dynamic kind of flips to she's the one now learning about him. And he talks about his parents, and we see her kind of provoke this emotional conversation from him and making him feel emotions. And the kind of contrast between machine and emotion is, I think, a big part of this film, and what makes it work better than a lot of other AI films, which kind of will always have the machines, not always, but often the machines is more like the emotionless side of the argument, and human beings kind of win out because of it. This is a film where the emotions to a degree become a weakness for the humans. And this is something in Ava, like the sex drive is an emotion that Ava knows how to exploit in Caleb. And I think that's one of the most interesting parts of the conversation is just the levels that AI can manipulate us in so many different ways. And I think one of the biggest things is because when everyone who defends AI says, well, it's good because AI, if you just use it as a tool, like within the film conversation, it's like, as long as it's not, creating and driving the whole narrative of the film, and you just keep it as a tool. And Caleb, back to the emotion thing real quick, it forgets the question that he does. I think Oscar Isaac actually is the one who brings it up. It's the question of does Ava actually like Caleb, or is she just pretending? And once again, he's not. I like how Garland doesn't try and really misdirect us in this film. He kind of lets it out on the table and trusts that we'll still change our opinion emotionally. And he says, he's like, was she just pretending to like you? So we have this question in our head from the very beginning, but Caleb seems to just forget this throughout the film. And of course, a part of that is because of the trust that we lose in Oscar Isaac. But throughout the film, he kind of forgets this question. And ultimately, because of that, what he becomes, like I said, AI, everyone defends as saying it could be a good tool. But what really happens is AI, the machine that is supposed to be a tool for the human being, Caleb ends up becoming a tool for her to use for her escape. And really, he becomes the tool. And I think the best symbolically way Alex Garland shows this, and one of the most brilliant elements of the film, in my opinion, is the very beginning. He lands in the bright green nature and then walks in through to Oscar Isaac's compound through like layers of machines and things like that. And then the very end of the film, we see, because he's confined to this compound. From the moment he walks in, he never again will walk outside of that door. He goes in, and the next time we see that door open, going through like the nice piano music out into nature, is Ava then ascends up the same path that Caleb went down, and ascends up into nature. And now Ava, the machine, is surrounded by the bright green nature, and in total contrast, Caleb, who's now the tool like the machine, is bathed in this strong red light, which is really representative of the trapped machine that Ava was. We see that red light in the scenes where Ava talks about being trapped. And now Caleb is the one trapped in the red light, and Ava is the one out in the bright green world of nature. And I think this just shows us how AI is going to inherit the earth one day, or how it could inherit the earth one day if we're not careful with it. I think it's such a strong visual statement that Alex Garland brings. And he has so many, ideas about creation with like the white dress of Ava and the scene where she's becoming like a human, essentially. She's like putting on the wig and the clothes and all those things. We have like this childlike chime score. The score is like chimes, and it's very like childlike. And it just feels like birth and creation as Ava's kind of going out into the world, until we have that brilliant final sequence of her shadow with other human shadows. And just the figure of her, you cannot tell the difference between her and another one of these humans. And now she just is fully assimilated into the world of humans. You would walk by her on the street and never think twice and never think that she was a machine. And I think just the way Oscar Isaac uses her character in so many ways is really what he makes such a strong statement in this film, which is just so brilliant and so thought-provoking.
Yeah, I think she's such a fascinating character, and Alicia Vikander's a really underappreciated actress, and she plays this part really, really, really well. I love the parts that she has in The Green Knight. But yeah, I think she's such a fantastic actress, and there's something, whether it's on purpose or not, but there's something so uncanny about the CGI around her face that is just every time you see it, there's just something you feel is slightly off. And whether that's this, like, maybe slightly touch bad CGI, it works so well in the way that it should do, even if it's not intended to. And yeah, every time you just look at her face, there's just something about it that's you feel is something off. And I think just the way she acts, the way she walks around, I think she plays that part so well. The name Ava as well is just, every time I hear it, I just think, kind of going back to what you're saying about creation, about Eve, like it just screams biblical for some reason every time I hear that. And I don't know where before, but I swear there's been other shows or films where an AI is called Ava. I don't think that's the first time that we've had that as well. It seems like it's a commonly recurring thing to name an AI in a film. And yeah, just her in kind of what was I going to say?
It's just kind of like the simple names, like Siri or something like that.
Yeah,
I can remind you of that.
Like one syllable. It's not AI, but like Eva and Wally, we have too. Like it's just simple one syllable names. But like Eve, very similar to Eve in the Bible, of course. The idea of creation, absolutely, I think is intentional.
Hal as well from
2001.
Yeah, the whole kind of just idea of how we view the AI and like what makes them human is just really interesting. Just, I don't know, it's interesting to think just how little has to change even in films and stuff before we like kind of associate them as human. Even other films that have approached AI, like Terminator or something, like all that it has to do is for Arnold to say like a funny line and smile, and suddenly we see that as like human characteristics and like kind of associate him as being like almost a human being. It doesn't take much for us to kind of start to see them as actual humans. And I think that's really interesting the way it approaches in this with Donald Gleason's character. Just almost, he really does fall for it. And although he knows that she isn't, he does kind of, he falls in love with her. And although it's kind of almost a trap for him to do that, he still falls for it. And I love the scene where he cuts into his arm as well, because he's starting to question if he's maybe even an AI, and then he doesn't know it. He's almost like a very advanced model that Oscar Isaac's made. So I really love that scene. Yeah, just so much that you can go down into. I obviously we've seen like the bad side of AI explored quite a lot of films. Like I just watched The Matrix the other day, or rewatched it. And people kind of forget that that's all starts from like AI just taking over humans. So yeah, it's something that we've seen a lot of times, but never really seen it on this kind of small scale and from this kind of angle. Which you kind of usually see the bad side of them actually taking over humans. Whereas I don't think it's necessary. The ending in this isn't like almost seen as a bad thing. She kind of just blends into humanity after she escapes. It's seen as like almost a good thing. She's escaping the prison that Oscar Isaac's put her in. So yeah, it's a good, interesting take on the whole AI sentient being side of film.
Yeah, pretty much just wrapping up my thoughts on the film. Yeah, it's of course, like I kind of said, there's just so many different ways that AI is used that are explored. Like, of course, the manipulation, the deception, the danger of like access to mass data, and like the way Oscar Isaac is able to like know Caleb's search history and figure out exactly what type of woman he's likely to fall for. And just like the facial recognition, and really makes us, because we all know our phones are listening to us. We know that there's like facial recognition everywhere, and we kind of just have at this point accepted it. But it really highlights how dangerous. And I actually don't think it was as widely known when this film came out that was going on. But this film's like almost 10 years old now. But yeah, it really shows the danger of that and how it can be used. And yeah, so much like the question of what's real, the way AI can manipulate emotions, and how it could one day inherit the earth. And I think, it reminds us that, like, if we're going to use this, it needs to be a tool for us. We do not want to become a tool for the AI. And I think that's what a lot of people who really push AI neglect, is they just assume it's always going to be a tool that we can control, and don't really understand the full possibilities of just where it can go. But I think Alex Garland fully understood the possibilities of where it can go, and creates a really thought-provoking script and film here. And, even things like, the next question is, how much are we as human beings becoming like machines? Like, Caleb works as a coder. We know that his parents died when he was young, and clearly he doesn't have any type of romantic connection with he doesn't have like any romantic connection with a girl or anything. So because of that, he kind of lacks this human connection that he finds in machines, whether it's through Ava or kind of just diving into coding all the time. And it really asks questions as well of, like, how much are we as humans becoming machine-like, and are we, like, how human are we these days? And then, like, little things like, the score sounds like it's probably made on a computer rather than, the breath of humans moving through a saxophone or a trumpet, or the hands of a human being playing a guitar. And I think that raises a lot of questions about how music can, manipulate us emotionally so strongly. And, like, what if the music's not even created by humans who are expressing human emotion through the music? So I think it just raises so many questions. And I like films that really make you think and ask difficult questions. And that's absolutely what this is, and why I appreciate this film so much.
Yeah, number one message of this film: don't watch porn, kids. But yeah, there were a couple things I wanted to touch on. Alex, you touched on earlier about this kind of, right when we get into the house, that there's something off with kind of Oscar Isaac character. But the first shot, I think it is, when one of the first shots anyway, when Caleb walks into this house, is this static high up shot, and he's walking out of this room, and it looks like it's from a camera's POV kind of shot, and you kind of instantly get this sense of being watched. And then a bit later, when we're kind of in the sessions, there's a shot where it kind of starts out of focus and then gets in focus, and it focuses on this camera that's behind like a thing of glass as well, and like there's just certain shots in this film that he just lingers on cameras, and even if that first shot isn't from a camera, it certainly looks like it is. And I think there's just this sense of entrancement as well from kind of the landscape shots. Some of them are kind of out of focus around the edges, and there's some bits of shallow focus in there as well, in some kind of those low landscape shots that we see. But yeah, I just think Garland does a really good job of creating this environment that feels really open, but actually really isn't.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, like, just how impressive this is as a sci-fi. Like, we don't often see a kind of the small scale, low. It tends to be in science fiction when it's low budget. It doesn't turn out to be a good movie. It usually has to be the large scale, almost 2001 epics that are really talked about in the genre, and that are really remembered. And whereas this one was done with 15 million, it's a debut. It's really low budget. It won the Oscar for visual effects against stuff like Star Wars, Mad Max. That's really impressive, especially working on this budget. It's pretty flawless in terms of like the blend of practical and visual effects. So yeah, just a really impressive debut from Garland. Just great stuff.
Shame to see where he's ended up now, honestly. Started so well, and it feels like everything he learned about the art is completely gone from his mind, and He's just gone back to back with tonal deaf nonsense garbage.
Yeah,
Not
I think
including
sometimes
Annihilation, of course.
I haven't seen Annihilation. I think sometimes there's stories that people are really passionate about, and they just kind of bring so much passion in when they tell those stories, but then don't really struggle to find that same connection with something to follow it up with, which I feel like I've kind of seen from what I've seen in his later filmography. I feel like he doesn't have that same passion with the later films that he brought to Ex Machina. But
I don't think Annihilation is as good as this. I liked the fact that it kind of delved more into like these kind of horror roots. You can kind of move towards it with that, and then obviously Men was kind of just a straight up horror film. Which
Annihilation is.
I don't mind Men. I do not think it's nearly as bad as people say. The screenplay is a bit weaker.
I agree, it's not as bad as people say.
Yeah,
it's horrendous.
I feel like I actually had stuff to
absolutely
say,
horrific.
whereas it's not that bad. And then
There
Civil
was-
War, just there wasn't really saying anything. I don't think so.
No. Just yeah, it's crazy going from such one of the most fascinating screenplays of the 2010s to going to the most non-existent one in the 2020s. It's crazy.
So we're going to get into a directorial debut draft where we'll draft some directorial debuts. So
Okay, yeah. Right, so we're gonna spin this. See who gets to go first in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I want
If it's
third.
Alex, it's rigged.
You want first?
No, I want third. I really don't want first.
100.
And I'm gonna get
Oh, you look
You
at
go for
that.
I didn't want it.
Please not second. Please not second. I don't want second.
That sucks.
Oh, come on.
Go for
Man. That's crazy. Got the worst position.
All right. I think both of you, it's not going to fall back to me. I think I could have got it at third, but I'm not going to get it at 6 or whatever. So give me, with the first pick, Team Fuck Panthers is taking Toy Story, John Lasseter.
That did not.
I don't think you think of it.
I did not think of that at all.
I was hoping you would.
Animation
I
is like
want
such a
third.
cheat for this.
Okay, so I'm going between two. I will go for 12 Angry Men. Pretty
I had a feeling you
obvious
were
pick,
taking that.
but yeah, I'll go for 12 Angry Men.
Yeah. I was thinking about going for that, but I have got the best directorial debut.
No, I'm not even going to
this isn't.
say.
Wait, this isn't. I was going to say Whiplash, but that doesn't count, does it?
No, it's not his directorial debut. No, it doesn't count. Does not count. It is not his directorial debut.
Oh, I thought I had a brilliant one there.
And it's not a TV movie. The one before isn't, so.
Okay, right. I've got another 5. Yeah, I've got another 5-star, and this is 100% a debut. I'll go for Ari Aster's horror debut, Hereditary. That's 100%
Interesting.
one.
You got 2 picks.
Oh yeah. I'll go for this because I know you are definitely itching to get it. I'm gonna go a movie from 2 years ago. I'll go Charlotte Wells' After Sun.
Damn it!
That's the other one I was considering.
Yeah, same. Oh, God's sake, man.
I knew it wasn't falling back though.
Ooh, interesting. I've got a couple that I know you guys won't take. I don't want to pander though. I don't want to pander. I'm going to go for probably the greatest directorial debut ever. Robert Eggers' The Witch. Definitely one of the greatest horror films of the century so far.
Now I will take.
It's a bit of a stretch.
Now I'm going to take the greatest directorial debut of all time. Give me Francois Truffaut's The 400 Blows.
Oh my God! No way! I forgot about that.
And
That was on my
Fucking
list.
Pander, I will take the other greatest directorial debut, which won't get me votes because not a lot of people have seen it, but give me Citizen Kane.
Nice.
What do you mean not enough people have seen it?
I feel like it's like it gets so much hate for no reason.
Next pick, I am going to go for the man, the myth, the legend, directorial debut, Michael Mann's Thief.
Ooh, that's a good pick. That's a very good pick.
Which was the one I was debating because he made a TV film beforehand. But this is a directorial debut, so I'm taking it.
Okay, yeah, that counts. I'm going to go one from the 90s that started the career of one of my favorite directors. I'm going to go Reservoir Dogs.
Ooh.
Tarantino's debut.
Interesting.
A brilliant one-location film.
Good film.
My next two picks are
How many picks have we done?
5.
Yeah, I guess 5.
How many picks? 5.
So this is your 4th.
Yes, I'm definitely going another debut from one of my favorite directors. I'm going to go The Evil Dead by Sam Raimi.
I knew you were taking at some point.
Completely forgot that was a debut. Next, I'm going to take, sadly, the one and only film of Hubo, An Elephant Sitting Still. Another one of my favorite films. Alex, last 2 picks for you.
Yeah, I knew no one was stealing these from me. I will start with one of the greatest debuts ever. Just rewatched it in theaters. Has me listening to the Asian version of Take My Breath Away. Give me Wong Kar-wai's As Tears Go By. Low-key one of the best in his filmography. And then give me the directorial debut of the one, the only, Robert De Niro. Give me A Bronx Tale.
Oh, I forgot about that.
One of my all-time favorites.
That is interesting. Is that the only film he's ever directed?
He did another one called The Good Shepherd, but I haven't seen that one.
Interesting. Okay,
Very
my
sad
last pick.
Another one of my favorites undrafted, but had to do it.
Interesting. There's so many ones that I'll probably shout out after this, but I am going to take Julia Ducournau's Raw from 2016. One of my favorite directors right now. Such an incredible horror director, and I absolutely love this film.
There's a lot of good horror debuts.
So many.
A lot of people debut in horror.
Yeah, true. Yeah, there's a couple of big horror ones left actually. I was gonna go Get Out, but instead I will go David Lynch's Eraserhead. I think is definitely.
Oh my god! There's no way I've forgotten
was going to take that.
There's no way I've forgotten that.
I was considering it.
I would have easily taken that if I remembered.
There are 2 major Panther ones that are undrafted.
So some of the ones that I had: Fruitvale Station,
Great one.
Director, Nightcrawler, Sound of Metal, Get Out, Donnie Darko, Sexy Beast, In Bruges, Ivan's Childhood, and of course Ex Machina. Those are the main ones that I had down.
Shawshank Redemption and Get Out are like the 2 major Panthers.
Oh, I'd completely forgot about Shawshank.
Yeah, so did I.
I knew it was there, but like I'm not pandering. So.
Oh, that's a crazy one to miss.
But
yeah,
I also some big ones I had Past Lives down as well.
Oh yeah,
and then I had Saw and Hellraiser down for more horror ones, but
Hellraiser is pretty mid though.
No.
So
Some of the best
Yeah.
practical effects ever.
Too bad the film sucks.
It really hurt me to not take one of my favorite films ever, The Maltese Falcon. That hurt me to not take. Also, a couple honorable mentions: Paul Schrader's Blue Collar, insanely underrated film, along with Richard Linklater's Slacker, Kevin Smith's Clerks, Paul Thomas Anderson's Hard Eight, also John Malkovich, American History X.
Synecdoche, New York. Forgot about that.
I've never seen that one. Major and
Charlie
the Minor
Kaufman.
from Billy Wilder, too. That's a good one. Oh, and Godard's Breathless.
Still haven't seen any of his.
Gotta shout that out.
I didn't know that was a dude.
Interesting.
But I think that wraps up our episode on Ex Machina. Like, subscribe, hit notification, comment down below. Please let us know your thoughts on Ex Machina, and please let us know how you think it compares to his newest film, Civil War. We have a lot of mixed opinions out there on it, so we'd love to know how you feel about where his career's gone so far. But yeah, tune back in for another great episode next week.